Rapid City, I still think its number one industry is tourism. So we all agreed we don't need more tourists right now. We got plenty, but we want to build a place where the locals can still play. I think Evan, as he talked earlier, one of the reasons he moved Rapid City was the chance to play here.
Welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 209, we have Evan Walterman and Doc Savage, representing the Black Hills Bike Hub, based in Rapid City, South Dakota. Doc is the current president, and Evan is the director of trails. We discuss all things mountain biking and trails in Rapid City, which has some very unique trail systems. Rapid City was also just named an IMBA Trail Town, and we discuss the process for that as well. Cattle Mountain Apparel, the brand that was built by travelers, hikers, trail runners, and mountain bikers, with the motto of venture far, laugh hard. While I definitely use Cattle Mountain apparel for mountain biking, Cattle Mountain is also my go-to choice for daily wear as it is super functional and comfortable. Cattle Mountain Apparel also offers a lifetime gear repair program with the goal of extending the life of their products while reducing waste in the process. If you ever damage any of your apparel, Cattle Mountain will repair it for free for life. By using the affiliate link found in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website, a small commission will come back to the Trail Effect podcast, which helps to cover the cost of expenses for keeping this show going. Now on to the Trail Effect with Evan and Doc. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I have Doc Savage and Evan Walterman, who are two board members of the Black Hills Bike Hub, based out of Rapid City, South Dakota. How's it going today, Evan?
Doing good, Josh. Doing good. How are you?
Doing good. And Doc, how are you doing today?
It's sunny and 55, and I'm going for a bike ride when we get done, so great.
Sweet. We should probably roll through this one then, huh?
It's going to be sunny all day.
Sounds good. And you guys are an hour behind me because of your time zone difference, so that means you got a whole extra hour.
Perfect time for lunch ride.
So there's a lot to cover here in Rapid City and the Black Hills in general. But first, we need to cover the backstory of both of you. And I'm going to let Evan kick this one off first. I know you two's backstories, but I want you to tell the listeners about your backstories because you both came from very different places and ended up, collaborating with the Black Hills Bike Hub. So Evan, let's kick off how you got into mountain biking and maybe how you got into Rapid City too, because you're not a native of Rapid City.
Yeah, that is true. So I grew up in Minnesota. As a kid, my family came out to the Black Hills a lot to vacation, as I think a lot of families in Minnesota do. And just kind of always enjoyed the area, enjoyed the kind of terrain. So when I went to South Dakota for college, when I was wrapping up, I was like, I want to live somewhere that I vacation to. I don't want to, have to use vacation to get there. So I looked at the Black Hills, and then I looked at Colorado as like somewhere I wanted to land when I got done with school. So I ended up getting a good job in Rapid City. That brought me out here. But, I always loved like outdoor recreation, hunting, fishing. I was a big, snowboarder. So Terry Peak and things like that drew me out here. Ironically, did not really mountain bike at all until I had lived here for a couple of years. So, and then actually I got to give credit to my brother-in-law, Kellen, who it was probably 2018. My wife and I had just found out we were pregnant with our first kid. I kind of had that post-college, about to be a father. I should probably get back into like caring about my health and, exercising and stuff like that. And once I got out of organized sports, I'm just not a gym guy, gym rat. My brother-in-law was like, hey man, we bought these mountain bikes. This is super fun. And Josh, you're in that general area, but the Minnesota scene had really been kind of taking off with mountain biking, modern trail building and stuff like that. So he's like, man, you got to try this out. You should definitely check these out. So I grabbed what I thought was a mountain bike, just, like a Trek dual sport or something, nothing crazy, couple $100 bike. And they came out to visit. I can like distinctly remember the first mountain bike ride ever. We went to Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park, rode up the west side, probably took a 45 minutes to an hour, like, what now would just take like a 10, 12-minute pedal. Get up to the top. We ripped down the east side on Wild Turkey, which is a pretty spicy trail, which in hindsight, with a 3x7 drivetrain, no dropper, no, not a good fork, any of that type of stuff. It was shouldn't have been a great time, but when we got done, I'm like, man, this is awesome. Checks all those boxes of like that outdoor, the adventure, the adrenaline, but you're still, you get your heart rate going, get your blood pumping. So I was like, man, this is it. And then the other thing too, we'll probably talk more about, the region, but what Spearfish had going with the Dakota 5.0, that was something that in my head was like, that would be something really cool to get to work up to. So first ride ever, late 2018, first 5.0 I went after was in 2020. So you can just kind of tell the escalation went from something I didn't really do a lot to just, now it's a part of my daily life. So yeah, that's kind of my introduction. And, not from Rapid City, but, this is home. I've actually lived here for 11 years now, which is longer than I actually ever lived in any one place growing up. So this is home now and home for my kids and family.
Doc, you have a whole different backstory, and it would be great if you could kind of touch on some of the higher level details that are interesting for us to hear about your backstory, especially considering you have the name Doc Savage.
Well, I am a Rapid City boy. I moved here. It's the first place I lived in the United States. I was born in Germany when my dad was in the Air Force and moved here in 1961. Someone accused me of being a California transplant the other day, and I had to laugh at them. But left, came back. As my dad finished his military career, my wife and I grew up here, met here, graduated from high school here. And in 1980, we both joined the Air Force and started traveling the world. Came back into Rapid City one time on an assignment at Ellsworth Air Force Base. And then in 2002, we retired from the Air Force. We had bought some acreage up in the Black Hills. And so we came home, built a house, and landed. But the name Doc Savage I got in the early 80s. I played softball a lot. A buddy I played softball with liked to read these books, Doc Savage, The Man of Bronze. It's a really bad movie. Do not rent it. It's 2 hours of your life you'll never get back. The books are so-so, but he started calling me Doc and it stuck. So it's carried me all this time.
Nice. How about your transition into two wheels and pedals?
Well, in my military career, later in my career, I made the mistake of I went on the Burger King diet plan, and my troops knew that I loved peanut M&Ms, so they kept me stuffed full of peanut M&Ms and giant jars or mugs of Diet Pepsi, and I lived on that. And so I got pretty big. And as we were getting ready to retire, my wife and I decided that we need to get back in shape. We started running again, did my first marathon on road, and it's like, oh, road marathon sucks. And I fell in love with trail running and decided that I was a ultra runner. And so I ran 11 marathons or ultra marathons over my retirement years, which was really fun. But also running them at plus 200 pounds at the time was probably not the best thing for my knees, and started having some cartilage damage. I got a stem cell treatment on my knees, and the doctor said, you can run some more, but you'll be back to see me in 2 years. And I didn't like paying that check again. So I took up biking, and I went to one of the local bike shops and bought a fat bike because that just looked cool, and started riding my fat bike a little bit, did that winter. And the next year I was like, I'm going to do the Dakota 5.0 and I'm going to do it on a fat bike, and quickly got advised by friends, that's a stupid idea. So ended up buying a hardtail. And then, I don't know, maybe 6 months later, a buddy told me, hardtails are fun, but you should try a full squish. And I was like, I don't know. And I walked in the bike shops and I'm kind of thinking full squish. And the next day he called me with one on sale. So been on full squish ever since. And that was like 10 years ago. So
there's a through line here that ties both of you into getting into mountain biking, or at least maybe progressing in mountain biking, which is the Dakota 5.0. Clearly that has a huge impact on that region, eh?
I think it's a rite of passage for mountain bikers here. You've got to do the Dakota 5.0 once. And I think a lot of us, I can't remember, I think I have 6 finishes. I'm kind of over the Dakota 5.0 now. My friends were the Silverbacks, and we actually run a road crossing now, which is a whole lot easier to train for, to go up there and drink beer and eat crappy food and stop traffic from hitting bikes going by. So
nice. So you're still involved.
Yes, I'm a volunteer.
Yep. Yeah, and I was going to say, for me, I think that's what makes it so special is the whole community, obviously Spearfish itself, but all the Black Hills. It's kind of something where it's just such a microcosm of all the different, people involved and who love biking, whether they're riding in it or just like Doc said, the Silverbacks going up to support and crew it. So I did sign up this year. This will be my 7th one, done it every year since 2020, kind of a thing where just sort of automatically do it every time. And, I'm a dad in my early 30s. I'm not going to win and not going to be competitive. Didn't get into mountain biking till later in life, but it's just so fun to be a part of it. And, 800 people out riding the trail. It's amazing trails. What Perry and Christy do up there is super special. So yeah, I think, and that's just one of the things that just make, the mountain biking in the Black Hills and that kind of culture around it so special.
And I do continue to brag that I do have a age group podium at the Dakota 5.0. So
we're going to detour slightly before we get totally off of Doc Savage, which is into your military background a little bit and how that ties into Project Echelon, because we have a mutual friend with Project Echelon, Eric Hill. And you want to maybe talk about what that is before we get back into the Black Hills?
Yeah, so Project Echelon is such a good program. I stumbled on it listening to a podcast one day, the Fast Cat podcast, and heard about this Project Echelon for veterans. It's like, well, I want to hear about that. So called one of their coaches, talked to him a little bit, and got signed up, and then got to know Eric a little bit. Actually, I crossed paths with him again at Gravel Worlds this last year. Such a good guy. It kind of comes in 2 forms. They have a pro race team that I think the race right now, Eric Bruner is sitting in with the yellow jersey in one of the races they're in Europe. And they're really successful as a domestic small Conti team. But I think the part that's more important is their mission is to get veterans on bicycles. It's to get guys who have either maybe some physical challenges, maybe some mental challenges, dealing with post-traumatic stress, get them out in the bike community, give you a support mechanism, introduce other bikers to them so they feel like that got a community to support them. And Eric does such a good job with that. I'm just really pleased to be part of that organization.
Yeah, I think they also hit pretty heavy on the suicide awareness, right?
Yeah, they're a support organization for Project 22. At the time when Project 22 was formed, there was 22 veterans a day committing suicide. So,
yeah, super important program. I honestly never saw it coming out of Eric. I remember when Eric first got on a road bike, he was living here in La Crosse because he was a college student here. He was a super good track athlete, and his track, career, I guess you could call it, with university was winding down because he was graduating, and just decided to pick up a road bike on a whim, and he turned into like the fast local college kid that was new. And then now look where he is.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to the Black Hills. Let's talk about the Black Hills just a little bit more generally on how you two know it. Maybe Doc, you can kick this one off since you've been living there for a couple more years than Evan, and talk about, we've talked about Rapid City slightly because that's where you guys are from. We've talked about Spearfish a little bit, but there's really more to it than just, Spearfish and Rapid City. There's cities between those 2 cities, and there's communities outside of those 2 communities on the perimeter.
So I moved back here the second time in 1972 when my dad retired from the Air Force. And I was a snot-nosed little 12-year-old just getting into dirt bikes. And that was my dad and I's thing. And so a lot of the trails that we ride now on mountain bikes, my dad and I rode those trails or companion trails to them on dirt bikes. So I was ripping through the hills all that time. The Black Hills is one of the areas, it's a very interesting spot that if you don't know it, it's like a little desert of forest. It's like a little thumb sticking up here. And it's also has so much national forest that has open access. So it just gives you a chance to play really hard. We have the highest point east of the Rockies, between the Rockies and the Pyrenees, I think it is in France. So we've got several peaks over 7,000 feet. So just lots of good places to play.
And with that, we're going to transition to another thing that just came up this week, which is the passing of Kevin Forrester, which is really a sad thing. Kevin, spent a lot of time, obviously, doing stuff. For those who know Kevin, they know he did a lot of things in the Black Hills. Maybe you can give your perspective on Kevin, Doc, as you knew him differently than maybe a lot of the people in the mountain bike community did.
I knew of Kevin through the bike community, but the place that I live, we've got a little area. We were setting up a road district and I met Kevin. He was the treasurer for Meade County. This is the county that I live in. And the guy went gangbusters to help me set up our road district and get it set up right. And it's paid huge benefits even today in how we're set up financially. We can afford to do things and keep our roads up. And he was just so generous with his time. Every time I'd text him or call him, he'd give me more really sage advice, which was great. And then we crossed paths and he was always friendly, always had a great handshake. And then Kevin's one of those guys that if you do things well, they're going to find another job for you to make it more challenging. And I think he got tired of that in Meade County and finally said, screw it, I'm going to be the mayor. And when Sturgis needed a mayor, Kevin took on that role because he'd already contributed so much to that Sturgis community. So,
yeah, and through all of this, there's been quite a bit of social media that's came out about Kevin and his passing this week, from government agencies to local mountain bike orgs that have talked about what Kevin has done. And, I met Kevin and got to know him as a trail builder. We met not even that long ago in 2023 at the International Trails Summit in Reno, and he went out of his way to meet me and, really wanted to connect and talk about trails. And I thought that was, one of the coolest things, right? And then again, same thing, just less than a year ago, we were in Madison, Wisconsin, again at the International Trail Summit. Kevin texted me, knew I was there. We set aside a time to just, connect and talk trails. And I didn't really have a true understanding about how much Kevin actually did in the Black Hills in terms of racing mountain bikes, running events, and just doing everything he did. I just knew him as a trail builder and a guy that really liked mountain bikes. But man, it's just incredible to learn more about Kevin. And it's super, super, super unfortunate that he passed and really quickly at that. Man, the legacy he left behind is just huge. What do you have on that, Evan?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't get the opportunity to know Kevin well personally, but his leadership and really making trails something legitimate. I know he was a founder of Black Hills Trails, and even today, Black Hills Bike Hub, we kind of use the legacy and the legitimacy of Black Hills Trails to help us, make those connections through the Forest Service and things like that. So, even today we're still benefiting from some of that work. But yeah, the Sturgis trail systems, the Centennial Trail, getting those established, keeping them up and running. Like Doc said, the Black Hills National Forest has, I think it's somewhere a little over 1 million acres of, publicly accessible land. And there's a couple 100 miles of trails that go all throughout that. The Centennial Trail is 111 miles point to point that goes kind of straight through the heart of that. So, keeping that cleared, keeping that maintained, that is no small feat. And Rapid City is, a town, I think we're in the mid 80,000 range. And, if you took the whole Black Hills community, we're probably in the 100 and some thousand. So, it's not like there's a huge population center to bite off, maintaining and caring for trails like that to that extent. But I know Kevin was a huge part of that and, making sure people took that time and kept them and preserved them. So yeah, I know. And Centennial Trail, I've bike packed that a couple times now. And it's just one of those things that, to be able to ride from your house in Rapid City and can get yourself basically, to Sturgis or almost to Spearfish, pretty much all on dirt. It's pretty special and pretty unique. So I think, anyone who's riding a bike in the Black Hills, one way or another, you're benefiting from the work that Kevin did. And, enjoying that legacy.
Yeah, just incredible. Let's transition to back to Rapid City and talk about, some of the backstory that has been learned. Both of you have learned about, how trails really came to be. There's a couple different trail systems, and we're talking Rapid City proper now, just for the listeners. Like we're moving out of the National Forest and into almost what you consider urban Rapid City at this point. But let's talk about, we'll talk about Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park first, and then we'll move on to Skyline after that.
Yeah, Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park. So, and actually a lot of this, there are things, you kind of hear these stories of how these parks and stuff established. But Josh and I had the fortune of kind of hearing it directly from the people that made it happen last year when we were working together on the master plan. But I'll just kind of speak to it as I, heard those stories and understand them. But yeah, so Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park, Edna Larsen, she was kind of a very established person in the community for years. When she passed, she left essentially her fortune to a couple of folks that then formed Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park Board. And essentially she had three this is what it has to be. It has to be a park named Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park. It has to be open to the public, and it can't have overnight camping. So some, specific, but pretty broad. And so the guys behind that, they basically said, okay, well, what can we do with this? And they essentially saw an opportunity for this large piece of land. It's basically like a prominent ridge line right in the middle of Rapid City. I mean, it actually here we kind of call the east side of the west side based off of this kind of ridge line. I think it's probably about 250 to 300 acres. It was all privately owned and was parceled up for essentially what would be, million or multi-million dollar homes up on the top of this ridge. And they got together and they're like, we got to grab this all at once and preserve it so this doesn't get developed. And this is a resource the community can have. I know for years there's kind of social trails and all kinds of stuff that was going on there. So I think they saw like, hey, this is, trails, and this is something people are using it for. I think this was probably late 90s, early 2000s that this was all happening. I wasn't there obviously, but basically there was a big auction where it was going to be sold into these parcels, and the board pulled together and kind of told everyone what was going on, and we're like, we need to make this happen. So they were able to essentially bundle it all up in one piece and close the deal. I want to say they said they purchased all the property for around $1 million or $1.5 million, which is pretty substantial. I mean, when you look at the per acre price, it's not bad. And today it's something that, add a zero and then some probably. So pretty incredible they were able to do that. And then quickly after that, they said, okay, we need to get trails here. So actually, I think they had Joey Klein with IMBA out here. And if I'm not mistaken, Josh, you had said even, Aaron with Rock Solid was out here at one point working on some of these trails. So kind of cool that, right at that early 2000s, kind of as the modern mountain bike trail era was kind of starting to develop, and trail building as an industry was really kind of developing. Those trails were built at that time. So now there's like 23 or 24 miles of trails. And it's incredible. From where I'm sitting right now at my office, it takes me about 5 minutes to jump out the door of the office to pedal over there and ride those trails. And it's just super special. So I think all in all, they're probably, $5 to $6 million in property purchase, trail building, and trail maintenance since then. And I think that's something that's, if you live here, for me, I didn't know that. And you can almost take it for granted of, yeah, we have all these cool trails, but when we're talking about, serious dollars and stuff like that to really make this stuff happen, we're super fortunate that this park exists, and, their goal is to basically keep it here forever.
Doc, you were in that very same meeting. You want to maybe bring your perspective into that?
Well, it's kind of cool, just first location, because it sits on a main thoroughfare through Rapid City. Old timers, we call it the Big Fish, because there's a giant concrete trout there. But it later became Founders Park. That is what the city park section sits right there. There's a memorial to 2 Rapid City police officers that were killed in the line of duty there. It also has entryway from our bike path, which is a concrete east-west, about 13 miles of bike path through the town. And it all connects right there. And we can jump right across that city land and jump onto Hansen-Larsen. Because I was up there running on those trails before I was mountain biking. And that was a regular deal is go up there, do a run up down the hill. And that was a good, 4-mile run. So, and that's where I learned a mountain bike. It's like when I finally said, okay, I got to learn how to go up and down hills and ride some stuff. That's where I learned it. It was really kind of fun because we had Joey Klein out here a little over a year ago to do trail care school up in Spearfish. And I hosted him the day prior, and we went up and rode some of the trails that he put in. And it was interesting to see his 15, 18-year assessment of how his trails had lasted. So,
yeah, and I believe, is it Dave Dessel from Trail Art also had quite a bit to do with that? I don't know Dave personally. Yep. I just know that his name came up quite a bit when we were talking about the construction of the original trails.
Dave was Trail Design. I think that's his company. They were kind of the maintainers. They were under contract from the Hansen-Larsen board to take care of that for quite a while. So
that's a unique thing to bring up because it is still private, open to the public, as you guys all disclosed early on. And they do have an employee that they continue to pay for some of the maintenance at that park.
Yep. Yeah. So it is essentially privately held by the Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park Foundation or board. Jeff Dennison and Steve Flannery, I definitely want to make sure we acknowledge those guys. They were the ones that really made all this happen. And, could have just been a little postage stamp grass lot with the swing set and a playground, but instead we have this just awesome wild playground. But yeah, so it's essentially they privately own and maintain it. Like you said, they have a contract with Kenny Harrison, who he's essentially the one that opens and closes the trails based on the conditions. And then the bike hub, we work with him to help support him. Obviously one guy with 20 miles of trails, and the soil we have here is pretty erosive, and a lot of these trails are really steep, which is part of what makes them so special and fun, but also does make it a lot of work to keep them here forever. So, but yeah, so they have that, that's part of the, where they pay for that operational cost and really don't, they provide all this for free. There's no trail passes, there's no charge, it's free and clear for the public to use, which is pretty special.
And Jeff and Steve are such good guys. They're both, they're my age kind of guys. I think both of them are like me, made that jump to the e-bikes, but such good guys. And they're really devoted to that project. The only thing you have to be careful with those two is if you get them in a conversation, you need to double whatever time you think it's going to take.
Well, and I think it's super remarkable that they pulled in IMBA when they did and had the foresight to bring in a modern twist on trails, and, that wasn't uncommon, but it wasn't, I'm going to say it's the first that I had heard of park like that, because it was pretty, IMBA wrote their book, I want to say in 2003 or 4, and this stuff takes time to really, for people to, be gravitate towards, right? It's not like you're going to flip a switch and be like, okay, trails everywhere, right?
The story Joey gave me was that he kind of went up there, did a lot of the groundwork, figuring out some basic concepts. And then there were several different, very juvenile trail construction companies that came in, and each of them took a little different section and said, you do this, we'll tie it all together. And Joey just did a lot of oversight. Side story on that, though, they're in the middle of construction. Joey gets a phone call and says he has to leave the next day. He got called to go build trail for former President Bush.
Yeah, that's got to be pretty incredible. Our mountain biking president.
Yeah.
So one of the most interesting things that came out of doing some work there in Rapid City to me was that almost at the same time, almost the same type of story, a little bit different twist to it, but completely independent of each other, which is the part that's crazy to me. You have a group of people that pretty much did the same thing for Skyline Wilderness Area. The details are a little bit different, but by and large, the stories aren't that different. Let's talk about Skyline Wilderness Area. And Evan, why don't you kick that one off?
Yeah, for sure. It is pretty crazy because, very similar time frame. except for instead of, kind of a backward story. So instead of having like, we have, money we're entrusted, what can we do with it? Instead, it was a bunch of different people, just within the community that said, so essentially kind of the south side of town, this same ridge line that runs through Rapid City, divided by basically Rapid Creek and a highway we kind of call the Gap. So to the south, you have Skyline Wilderness Area. So yeah, these kind of group of people got together and said, hey, we need to prevent this area from getting developed. I think they, it was kind of something that a bunch of different groups, like everyone saw the need to preserve this area, but didn't really know how. And then ultimately, there was a couple of key people, and I know there's a lot of other people I don't know that are involved, but Roger Heacock and Chuck Tennant, they were kind of the ones that ended up spearheading the effort. But basically they realized, okay, the city we can't necessarily just get the city to purchase this. How are we going to do this? And really what they realized is like, they just needed to purchase it from the people that own these parcels and essentially gift it to the city to make sure it never got developed. So yeah, similar time frame. I think actually maybe even slightly earlier. I want to say the conversations maybe started in like the late 80s, and then a lot of this stuff happened in the 90s. So they banded together. They created Skyline Preservation Board. That group essentially, between fundraising and different ways, got the money together. The one thing though that really was like, wow, that's cool and like pretty unique is I think when they were closing the deal, they were like $600,000 short from making the sale happen. And they're like, we've been on this campaign, we've been fundraising. The exact dollar amount escapes me, but I think similar situation of just purchasing the property, they were, in the $1 to $2 million range. And this is in the 90s, not today. So Chuck, he was talking to a president of a local bank, and he was like, hey, we see the benefit, we see the need here, we really want to make this happen. We'll essentially sign you a loan for this difference to close the deal. And I'll explain this part a little bit more. So what we have here in Rapid City is what's called the Vision Fund. I'll get into that more later, but basically the president was like, hey, you guys sign the line, we'll give you the money to close. It'll get reimbursed by the Vision Fund, most likely. And we can make this happen. So anyways, Chuck was like, yep, let's make it happen. So he did. And to me, it's just like, wow, that's just, we need to have people that are willing to, obviously we don't want to all lay it on the line, but like that's dedication and really like, taking a risk to make things happen. And not for themselves to buy it, but for the community to have it. So pretty special there. So yeah, they ended up securing the property. I don't know the exact terms, but essentially the Skyline Drive Preservation gifted it to the city for, probably a nominal amount. And then they essentially still exist today to oversee what happens there. And then since that initial setting up of this property, they worked with the city and have developed a pretty robust trail system up there, probably, 12 to 15 miles of trails. Can't think of the trail builder, but they did a master plan and essentially built most of these trails. And today the City Rapid City Parks and Rec actually are actively maintain and build the trails up there. And it has kind of a totally different feel from Hansen-Larsen. This is a lot more wooded, kind of a lot more like that really, kind of tight, twisty, narrow, what I kind of call is like that old school single track. Some of the sections are kind of that awkward and techie, but yeah, super cool. And then just, how that came together. Pretty unique story. So yeah, Josh and Doc and I were sitting there, talking through some of these things. And same thing with Hansen-Larsen is everyone kind of knew the rumor of like, oh yeah, this kind of big thing that made it happen. But it was so cool to hear that from the guy that did it. And I think at the end, what did he say? That it was like his wife hadn't found out about it until years later, well after the Vision Fund did end up reimbursing that loan. And, ultimately, if it hadn't, it would have theoretically been on the hook for that. So his wife was pretty disappointed to hear about the risk there. But yeah, pretty cool. And yeah, so today still Skyline Preservation is actively involved, with kind of overseeing what happens up there. And then the city, like I said, is pretty unique. I mean, and that's something I think that we really benefit from as the Bike Hub is, we didn't have to necessarily convince the city or convince Parks and Rec staff and stuff to do these things. They've actively been involved and and working with these trails and maintaining these trails for, probably coming up on 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Like you just pointed out when we were talking to the board about this, the one guy brought up, he's like, yeah, just to kind of add some more context to the story. His wife had no idea that they had co-signed the loan, and they weren't wealthy individuals.
Right.
So,
yeah. He was just passionate guy that was like, I want to support the community and help make this happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. I know that's actually something I've said to some of our volunteers. I'm like, hey, I'm not asking you to sign a, $700,000 loan, but like, we need that kind of commitment and energy to keep special things happening and keep our trails here in Rapid City. So.
Well, maybe Doc could fill in a little bit more context in terms of like, since he is somewhat of a local to Rapid City, we talked about Skyline Wilderness area, but it butts up against a Dino Park, right? Dinosaur Park. And that's a pretty remarkable landmark, I guess you could call it.
Yeah. So Dinosaur Park is a bunch of life-size concrete dinosaurs put up there by the CCC, I think in the late 30s when they were in Rapid City trying to give, men jobs as the country was going through some of the Depression era and some of the things going on in our country. So, and it's always been a landmark of Rapid City. You see so many of our logos have the picture of the Brontosaurus, Apatosaurus, whatever the correct name of it is today. My wife grew up on the west side of town, and out her bedroom window, she could see the dinosaur and claimed that was her dinosaur growing up. So, and then Skyline, before it was the Skyline Wilderness area, for those of us that went to high school, that was the place you took your girlfriend and made out or whatever things you did there. So.
Sounds incredible. That's definitely what people do in areas that don't get a lot of traffic, we'll say.
Yeah, there might have been a few underage drinking events up there too. So
that tracks with communities that have places like that.
I think the how long I can get called and charged for something has expired. So I think I'm good.
Yeah. What's also incredible to me is that, there's a pretty robust network of signage, even though I know one of the things is keeping the signage minimal. But you have signage, and I don't mean just like trail signage. I'm talking about signage that really lets you get perspective on the community and how it came to be. You have kiosks there that have old photos of the area. And I think it's so important to, when you come to these places, to be able to show off to people that aren't, residents to Rapid City or whatever city it is that you're in, the history of places like that. And you definitely get that at Skyline, right?
Well, yeah, there's a section there called amphitheater, and it's actually what it was. At some point in Rapid City, I thought it was in the 50s, where it's a terraced amphitheater that they have live music. We have had a bike event in that same basic area. We had a jump event for the crazy people, and we had some music there, and it was amazing how cool the music sounds inside that little amphitheater. So,
yeah, the acoustics are pretty cool. But yeah, what Doc was saying, it's all hand dug essentially into the hillside to create these terraces. You can still see them today. Obviously, they're overgrown and stuff like that. But yeah, Josh, like what you're talking about, throughout the park, there's signage like that amphitheater Doc was talking about. There's a little kiosk that tells you the history and some of that information. I should probably know better now, but ride by it all the time. And then yeah, at the trailheads, they have some of the history of how the Skyline Wilderness area was established. And, I think the other thing that's cool too is there's a huge list of local companies and businesses that have supported that, from originally making it happen all the way through to today. So yeah, it's definitely something that, really are a lot of people in the community support, whether they're actively trail users themselves, or they just see that, hey, I might not ride a bike, but I own a business and I can see that, the better trails we have or the more access we have, it makes it easier for me to hire good people and get them to come live here. So.
Well, and this is one of those trail networks that like literally lands in one of the initiatives by IMBA, which is the whole more trails close to home, and making your garage or your apartment or wherever it is you keep your bikes, your trailhead, because it has multiple neighborhood access points, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's probably two legitimate trailheads, and then probably 10 different access points on east and west side of the ridgeline. So yeah, it's super accessible.
Trail One Components, exceptionally crafted mountain bike components that support great trails. I personally run the Crockett carbon bars, the American-made Rockville stem, and the Hell's Gate grips on both my Trail Light and Enduro bikes. These parts are the real deal, lightweight, bomb-proof, and comfortable for my old hands and wrists. Trail One goes beyond great gear. Every component is named after a real trail, and a portion of every purchase goes directly back into trails. So when you upgrade your bike, you are also giving back to trails. When you purchase Trail One components using the affiliate link on the Trail Effect website or in the show notes, you are not just supporting your favorite trails and upgrading your bike, you are also supporting this podcast. Trail One components offer a lifetime warranty along with fast and free shipping. Let's move on to the creation or formation, however you want to say it, it's kind of one and the same, of the Black Hills Bike Hub, otherwise known as Black Hills Squared for those that don't want to write BH twice, because it's a very new organization. And you two can talk about the creation of that. In fact, maybe we'll start with Doc first, because you are the sitting president, I believe.
Yeah, they haven't fired me yet, so that's good. So let's say we're a new old organization. I believe, so our history is we were originally Black Hills Mountain Bike Association, which I think was incorporated as we learned 501c4 in 1993, I think was the year that was formed. And then it had highs and lows like any volunteer organization where they get some people in and there'd be lots of energy and they make some progress. And then there'll be a lull, people run out of gas. Like any nonprofit, you have a certain group that does a lot of the work and other people saying, I paid my dues, now bring me some fun. And it went through that a lot. And then it finally, I think COVID had a lot to do with it. It didn't die, but it went pretty dormant. So thanks to our current secretary, Brittany, I think it was 2024, about February, we had a reorg meeting and elected new officers. And so we brought on 7 new board members, and we're really fortunate. A lot of us didn't know each other. I didn't know Evan from the Man on the Moon, and we got to meet and become such good friends. Evan is an honorary silverback, even though he's not old enough yet. So we got really fortunate. We elected 7 board members that worked really well together, and we had skill sets that really merged. We had the people that we needed to bring it online. And that's kind of how Black Hills Mountain Bike Association got formed. And going later in discussion, we did some initial planning. What do we want to accomplish as an organization? And the rename was part of it. It's that we didn't want that lock in where we're only mountain biking. So we could do more than mountain biking. We could do some gravel riding, which is a thing I'm pretty passionate about. We could even include some of those roadies just because we'll be nice. So that really became the tagline we took on pretty early was all bikes, all rides, all people.
Let's talk about your involvement, Evan, and how you got pulled into this thing, because you're the trail coordinator.
Yeah. So, like Doc said, in 24, I was the 7 of us kind of all got elected. And I mean, talk about a serendipity situation that all the right people, different skill sets, willing to work together, pretty special. So the reason I ended up in that room myself is, I could see. So at this point, I'm 4 or 5 years into biking. It's a part of my regular life and something where our kids are learning to pedal, learning to ride bikes. Something we're bringing them into, and something I've always my kids and family is kind of always sort of the core of the why am I doing what I'm doing. And we talked about all these awesome trail systems, but there's another one, Raider Park, which has just a couple miles of trails, but it's really the only good, safe place for small kids to ride. Hansen-Larsen and Skyline are incredible, but if you're on a 16 or 18 or 20-inch wheel bike with no suspension, it's pretty intense. So I really just saw that opportunity of I want somewhere for myself to take my kids riding and somewhere they can grow up on. And have that progression and development. Going back to Minnesota to visit family, I saw all these trail systems. We went, and every summer we go to Cuyuna, Tioga, Red Head, up on the North Shore, throughout Duluth, even the Twin Cities metro trail systems. And they have that scenario where, our 18-month-old could cruise on his Strider, mom could ride the moms can ride a blue green route, and then the dads can go ride some techie stuff, and it's these stack loops and stuff. And I was like, we have incredible terrain. We're in this Goldilocks where we have most areas, there's 400 or 500 feet of elevation relief where you can do some really awesome stuff, but there's a little bit of that gap there. So I was like, I'm a construction guy by trade. So, and actually, ironically, before I got into biking, I worked for Parks and Rec as a contractor, and we built the BMX track we have today and things like that. So it's like I've been around it and the building of it, and had some of those relationships with those people, through work. And I was like, I feel like maybe I can help push some of this stuff forward. And selfishly, if I can, get somewhere that we can go take my whole family on a Sunday afternoon and go ride, like that would be worth it. So I had basically reached out to some of the little trail projects and stuff that were going at that time to get involved and say, hey, how can I help, help with the digging, the fundraising, and just kind of be the sort of guide rails of project management, if you will, to just kind of make sure we do things the right way. We don't just get some stuff done and then get shut down because we went about it all wrong and, got the city shutting things off. So that was kind of how I ended up in the room. And then, like I said, the kind of gravitated into the trail role. Originally, I started out as the treasurer. I think they were just like, hey, we just sort of sat down and drew lots. So I ended up with that. I'm not an accountant. My wife is, but quickly like, hey, someone else should do this accounting stuff. Like, I should be the trail guy. I should get involved there. So that's really kind of how I got involved. And, even today, like why I keep doing this is, and being able to see, the All-American Trail that the Bike Hub has helped develop and things like that. We just put a cool little manufactured feature in there. And it's like being able to take my kids there and have them ride that. It's just really, really satisfying and kind of makes it all worth it. So.
That was actually going to be my next topic, which is the All-American Trail. Maybe you could expand on that, knowing the backstory of how that came to be and what it is going to do and what it has been doing, actually, because sections of it are built.
Yep. Yeah. And actually, so that was a trail project that was in the works since like 2019, 2020. Like Doc was mentioning, the Black Hills Mountain Bike Association was spearheading. And so essentially the logic behind that is, so we have a bike path in a greenway, and it's 10-foot wide concrete bike path, probably 9 miles long, east to west side of town, goes through parks and things like that along Rapid Creek, which runs through the whole city. And basically it was like, how can we give people a super easy, super accessible way to ride on dirt? You don't have to have trail forks. You don't need to have a mountain bike and figure out and like do it intentionally. It can just be there like, oh, hey, what's this little ribbon of dirt there? And I mean, really what I kind of look at it is it's really a desire path, where people just kind of have went on the dirt to shortcut. But if you imagine that desire path was kind of ebbs and flows and kind of curves around with the landscape and in parallel to that bike path. So I think right now we're probably up to about maybe 3 or 4 miles. We're actually going to go out on Sunday and put in another section for probably about another 3.3 or 0.4 miles of that. But yeah, it's super cool. So, when that family is out at the playground, at the park that the bike path goes through, you can just, right next to the bike path is this little ribbon of dirt, and it's like, hey, what's that? And, kids can cruise on it, check it out. So we kind of look at it as, closing that gap, but also maybe a little bit of like a membership development tool of like, kids, especially for me when I was a kid, it was like, oh, what's this? I should check that out. And eventually if the kids are pushing mom and dad, next thing you know, you might get the whole family of like, hey, we should look at mountain biking. We should look into this. So yeah, so that's really what it's been about. And, really a huge supporter of this. And I think originally where this idea came from was from Strider. So, Striders, they're sell them all over the world. But Ryan McFarland, the founder, lived in Rapid City. He started the company for his son, who that jump contest Doc was talking about was a Aaron style. And his son Ryan won that year where we were up in the amphitheater. I think he threw down a backflip, and that was like a hands down. All right, yep, we all acknowledge that wins. But anyways, Ryan's been a huge supporter of the Bike Hub and just cycling in the community in general. And so he was kind of part of what spearheaded that. They actually, I think they have a shop in Bentonville, and there's the All-American Trail in Bentonville as well, which he was a part of. So that's kind of that correlation there and really where it came to be.
Yeah, that, so that goes to show how the community is being tied together with the Black Hills Bike Hub and that community support from businesses, but also from government agencies. Maybe we could talk a little bit about your city. It's been touched on a little bit, but just how much the city really does value these trails.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think probably the biggest thing to caveat is, it isn't like we've, just completely sold these people. We're not great salesmen or anything. We've been super fortunate. And I think, to me, I look at it as like these trails and cycling and stuff is just ingrained in the community. So a lot of those key people, our long range planner, Kip Harrington, he's a mountain biker. Our Parks and Rec division manager, Scott, is a mountain biker. So these people, really it's something where they've kind of been, it's something they care about. And obviously they're not going to just push it too much. But, when a group like us can come to them and say, hey, here's ways that, we can represent the community and we want to push these things forward, then they're like, well, hey, obviously you don't have to tell them what a bike is. They love and use them. So it's been really great to be able to partner with people like that. So, we've had great support. Rapid City Parks and Rec. We have a standing monthly meeting where we talk about our projects and things like that with them. Right now I mentioned the Vision Fund. We're working with them to design and we'll this summer construct a bike park, which will have, pump track, jump lines, all that cool stuff. And, that Vision Fund, just like super briefly, basically it was a percent sales tax that was established. It's a council of the community members that essentially go, review applications, but a lot of the trails that we have were funded through that mechanism. The bike park, we're working on $600,000 budget that was funded through this Vision Fund mechanism. So see, it's built a lot of the infrastructure we have today, and we see that it gives us the opportunity to, maybe have sites on something that would be just unrealistic for a grassroots organization or volunteer-based people to fundraise for. But, another one, Hansen-Larsen Memorial Park, like we mentioned earlier, Steve and Jeff being big supporters, being bikers themselves. Skyline Drive Preservation, Roger's a big trail runner, but he sees the benefit and sees the why. So he's happy to work with us. Another one, we kind of just branched out more recently to City of Box Elder, which, an average person, if you're driving through, it looks like it's all Rapid City, but it is a separate city. And the doc mentioned, the reason Doc was here is the Ellsworth Air Force Base, which is, based right in Box Elder. So working with the City of Box Elder, they see this. We have the new B-21 bomber rollout coming here. So they're seeing a huge influx of growth. And, we approached them, but they were like, hey, actually, you know what? We have a Parks and Rec master plan and trails are in there. We just didn't really know who or what or when. So we've been able to just kind of plug in and help support that of like, hey, okay, we can represent what anyone who rides a bike in your community is looking for. South Dakota Ellsworth Development Authority, another great example. One of their key guys, Howie Alberton, he's shows up to every single one of our trail work days and is probably our best, trail work teacher. But, he works for them and is, again, it's not an objective he's pushing, but when we approach them, he understands and is able to help support us. School of Mines, I mentioned Rapid City Area School District with the Raider Park, Tom Fifley Memorial Trails there. So yeah, and these are just within Rapid City proper. So a lot of different organizations and entities, but it's, like I said, it's not like we're just super slick salesmen. We've just been so fortunate that because this is such a part of the community, those people are there and they understand it. So where it's more just connecting and plugging in and supporting what they're doing versus trying to just convince them it's worth doing and spin it all up on our own.
For sure. Doc, let's let you fill in some of the business side of things because you are a business owner, but you also involve a lot of businesses into Black Hills Bike Hub. I think there's a couple breweries that maybe support it. There's 2 really good bike shops that are right in Rapid City. Let's talk about that.
So a couple things. Yes, I do own a small brewery that happens to be a block away from the bike path and from Memorial Park and from Hansen-Larsen. We have a second brewery that sits also adjacent to us. So it's kind of convenient place. You go ride your bike and have choices of 2 really good breweries to come have a cold, tasty beverage after. And then the two bike shops are really close to, one is close to Hansen-Larsen, one is a little closer to Skyline Drive. And the bike shops just bend over backwards to help us with the bike hub. Every time I walk in the door and say, hey, I need this. And we try not to go to that well too often, but they just hand me stuff. I was working on planning some gravel events for this spring in our gravel series. And I just called one of the guys there. It's like, hey, I need some door prizes. They're like, okay, I gotcha. That was the whole conversation. So, and then other business, it's amazing. We've put some new trails. There's a flow trail up on Skyline, and so many businesses came online and said, what, you need a water truck? Okay, I'll park a water truck up there and you could just use it while you're construction. Or another place said, what, you need to reseed? Okay, I'll bring my hydroturf stuff and we'll spray and replant all that material that you guys move. So the Rapid City businesses, I think, are going to see value in that. And I think we're going to talk more about Trail Town. That will get to there. But the other thing I think that's going to be a big benefit for us is I'm also on the Rapid City Parks and Rec Master Plan Advisory Committee, which is a whole mouthful. They're doing a 10-year master plan. And fortunately, one of the engineers from RDG, that's I think the lead manager for this project, is also a mountain bike rider. And one of their opening statements was, trails are critical within your city to be successful. And so as he's saying that, I'm doing the happy dance because every plan that they've laid out there have had either a trail system in it or some kind of little bike park inside every little city park. So I think that when that goes to the city fathers and the government sees this big plan and say, okay, bikes, I think we'll have a better seat at the table in those discussions then.
And you brought it up ever so slightly, but we're going to dive into it now, and we're going to put some context to this. When I was in Rapid City doing some work for your trail master plan, IMBA rolled out or announced a new program that week, which was the Trail Town program. And since that visit, Rapid City has become a trail town. Let's talk about what that means and the process you all went through to become one of, I believe it was 28 trail towns in the United States.
So I would say the three of us were riding around Evan's truck, which was the three of us and all of Evan's construction equipment. So it was a little cozy in the back end. But as soon as that came out, I couldn't get to my phone fast enough to start to read what was out there because it aligned perfectly with one of the tenets we set in our strategic planning is, why are we building trails? Why are we maintaining trails in Rapid City? And are we doing it for the local residents of Rapid City, or are we doing it for the bike tourism thing? Rapid City, I still think its number one industry is tourism. So we all agreed we don't need more tourists right now. We got plenty, but we want to build a place where the locals can still play. I think Evan, as he talked earlier, one of the reasons he moved Rapid City was the chance to play here. Yep. And so when that Trail Town criteria came out, I was doing a happy dance in the back seat. And I think I even told Evan, we're going to do this. And I was really excited to move that forward. And I can't give Evan, can't say enough good stuff about Evan and how much work he did, because working with the groundwork that we did for our trail master plan really fed right nicely into our application for Trail Town. So we really kind of killed two birds with one stone.
Let's talk about all that work you put in to become a trail town. And I want a quick caveat because this hasn't been mentioned, but when Doc said tourism is kind of a thing for Rapid City, there's this other thing that's not too far south of there called Mount Rushmore. So that probably brings a fair amount of people into the region, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Doc downplayed that a little bit. I mean, I would say, I don't have the economics report in front of me, but I would say that tourism is definitely a huge chunk of the pie of the industry here. There's a lot of other things, but that's definitely a big piece. So yeah, like Doc said, what the Bike Hub was really focused on was the community, for the community, building the community, trails that our membership in the community wants, filling in those gaps. So when we saw that, I remember that vividly, Doc. We were talking about that when that came out, and we were like, yeah, this is exactly what we're like, kind of exactly what we're about. Like, did they we were like reading each other's websites or what's going on here, So, so we were kind of all over it, kind of the process that we went through. So, and I think this is all probably out on IMBA's website, where you basically kind of complete this survey, probably takes you a half hour of going through and answering these different questions about, essentially how established your trails are, mileage, the organization, the involvement, the buy-in, those types of things, answering a lot of those questions. If you get a certain score, you're essentially kind of greenlit to actually apply for the program. So we all sat down, our board, actually, we did it wrong. We all filled it out. So IMBA got like 7 different answers, ranging probably a 50 to 80 point spread from high to low. And then we're like, oh no, we were supposed to sit down and do one. Okay, perfect. So we did that. And, we were able to qualify for that. So yeah, we got kind of shortlisted to be able to apply. So, filled that form out, like Doc was saying, a lot of the stuff that we were going through with the master plan. I mean, being a new old organization, it's like we have a lot of history. Like I think Doc said 93. I want to say I saw some when I first kind of got under the hood. We saw some documents back from like 90, 91, 92. So, have a lot of that, but yet kind of really refreshed and reinvigorated in just the last few years. So it was good to be able to kind of go through those conversations and understand and be like, yes, okay, we do have this connection. The group has had this legacy connection, but now the leadership today and the people involved, we can say legitimately, yes, there are these meetings happening. There is this connection there. We do have, we are doing these different things that qualify. And obviously it was pretty easy to throw the spreadsheet together and be like, I think the criteria was 20 something miles of trails. It's like, depending on where you draw the line, we could go from 40 to 140 super easily. So we really focused, and like right now, especially for what I'm focusing on, is really primarily the Rapid City proper, what we call it in Box Elder, that kind of core, city line area. So that's the kind of the scope we approached the IMBA Trail Town from. And with that, we were able to qualify on those mileage and different requirements. So, and then I think once we, got that completed, we got interviewed a couple of different times. I know Doc and I both, we talked to Dave Weens a few different times, and just kind of some different interactions within the staff, essentially probably them just making sure, hey, you guys are claiming that you have this many miles of trails, doing some investigation there. You're talking about, you have these different people on your team, you have these different partners in your community, checking that out. I'm sure they, probably go and reach out to some of those people, the cities and things like that, just to kind of gut check it. And then, kind of, all right, we'll keep you guys posted. And then I think it was a couple months that we were waiting, and, having gone through a lot of this stuff, and even, myself, going to ride in other communities and other places, it's like, man, we really do have what I feel like captures that trail town essence. So we felt really good about it, but obviously until you don't know. So anyways, when that announcement came out, we were pretty excited. And like I said, I think we look at it as it's, if you come into Rapid City and all this stuff exists, it's almost easy to take it for granted. Like, and there's a ton of people where, you can go ride 20, 30 miles of trails, hardly ever see anybody, hardly ever talk to anybody. If you don't go on social media or our website, or you don't go into the bike shops, you can just be like, yeah, this stuff exists and I can just go use it, So, so we felt like, getting this acknowledgement and like, hey guys, this is what we felt like we are. And, so for IMBA to say, yes, Rapid City, you guys do have that, I think it's really kind of adds some legitimacy for us. And it's, I haven't been doing this for 20 years, but guys like, Tim with Acme Bikes and Trent now and Ian with Black Hills Bikes, it's like those guys have been doing this stuff for 10, 20 years. So it's like, hey guys, you're part of why we have this. So I think it's a huge kind of pat on the back. And, cities love this type of, official designations and things like that. So it really, like Doc was saying earlier, it's really helps us when we can go to them and say, hey, we were officially recognized, by International Mountain Bike Association. We didn't just decide this for ourselves. This, very legitimate group has this designation and we were awarded it. I think that, it's just really something where we see like that can help open some doors and, kind of build more of those bridges than what we have today. So.
Well, and it sounds like IMBA really took the vetting process seriously. It wasn't just about like filling out a filling out the document to get the metrics right. You know what I mean? If they're doing multiple interviews and truly trying to do some research into what Rapid City or any community that got, this designation, that's a pretty incredible thing, right?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, talk about a pretty significant undertaking. And, obviously we don't see the back end of, how many applied and how many they had to vet. But yeah, it was definitely something where, like I said, we felt like we were kind of a sure thing, but it's this pretty substantial process. And, it's something where, it's a small nominal application fee. So it's not like this, pay to play designation or badge you can buy. It's, nominal fee. And they're really doing the homework and vetting it and deciding whether or not you qualify for this. So, yeah. And I think for us, like I said, and even just for us in our membership, it's like, yeah, this wasn't just some send an application, send your check in, and then they just shoot this thing back. It's something that they're taking it seriously, and it really does mean something if you get it.
And I think we were, of course, well deserving. There's been a lot of work to get us to this point, and we have plans to keep going forward. I think another benefit came in ours that both our interviews were with Dave Weems. And Dave has been in the Black Hills before. He is at least once won the Dakota 5.0. So experienced mountain biker coming in, knew our community. When we started talking some of our trails, he was at least loosely familiar. And when we did our initial application to join IMBA as a chapter, we were in discussion. I was in discussion with him like, well, and one of the criteria was how many miles of trail do you have within 50 miles of a central point? And when I sent them back that I can give you 400 miles of legal single track or two track, they couldn't believe we had that much trails right here. So,
yeah, when you're that close to a national forest. And as we established earlier, between you guys, that 50-mile radius, I mean, that pretty much, and this, I don't, but that pretty much gets you to spearfish.
It gets you really close, but what it really does, it puts you on 200-mile trail networks. We mentioned the Centennial Trail. It's a pretty backwoods single track mostly, and it also puts you on the George S. Mickelson Trail, which is 100-mile north-south crushed gravel. It's a bike trail, but
rails to trail. Yeah.
Rails to trails, yeah.
You also work with IMBA, and I could be mistaken here. I'm fairly certain I'm not. But you also work with IMBA on like IMBA Trail Care Crew-esque type stuff. Like IMBA doesn't have the Trail Care Crew going on like they used to when it was, two people in a Subaru driving around the country. But they have a similar program going on. And I believe you're working with them on that as well.
Yeah. Actually, in a little bit over a month, we have Joey and Marty and a few other IMBA folks coming out to do a trail care class here in Rapid City. We're hosting it in the city Parks and Rec building, and that was really the biggest reason to bring it out here. Is we're talking with Parks and Rec, and they have, I think, 6 or 7 employees that are like, hey, these people are all involved in trail work. Maybe it's not their full-time job, but they're out there working on these trails. So we're like, hey, we've got just the thing for you. Let's get them in here, a 2-day workshop to really help empower them and give them some knowledge of what they're doing. So yeah, I think we're going to end up having 20 folks in that class. Good chunk of Bike Hub volunteers, a good chunk with the city staff. I think actually IMBA's going to have some BLM folks coming in, and then open it up to some of those other smaller organizations or nearby organizations, not necessarily smaller, that are doing trail work, in the Black Hills region or South Dakota area in general, and, give them a seat at the table to come check it out. So, yeah. And like Doc mentioned, we do Spearfish Trail Coalitions had one last year, and they opened up the door to us. And I think they gave us 10 seats or something like that. So we had quite a few people go last year and really got a lot out of it. I actually did participate myself, and it was super helpful to, have a construction background, but then really like, how is that different for actually trail building and not just doing it, but like how to help instruct volunteers and understand why you're doing what you're doing. So you could go walk a trail and see, hey, this is a spot that we should work on, or this spot we shouldn't. So yeah, we're excited for that. I know that's a big thing that, we want to help these, the city, because that's maybe not something they even know exists. But if they have people out there doing it, hey, let's help give them the knowledge. And, Joey is a wealth of knowledge. If we can get him working with the city staff and just share that information. Yeah, that's about as good as it gets. So.
And that's a real full circle moment with, Joey coming back to Hansen-Larsen. Obviously, Doc, you talked about him being back there for a day, but now he'll get a more intimate look at something at Hansen-Larsen, likely. So, although I'm sure you'll spend a fair amount of time over at Skyline as well, since that is a city park and that is city staff that manages that park in particular.
Yep. Yeah, I think we'll probably do most of the second trail work day at Skyline. So. Yeah, give those guys right on their home trails. They're working on kind of how to do it right. So,
well, is there any topics that we haven't discussed that you want to discuss before I get into the one question that I close with for both of you?
I think the Trail Town designation, I think one of the biggest benefits for like the businesses in Rapid City is it's the same reason that the Waltons put things in Bentonville. It's to be able to prospective young people you want to bring in to be able to say, we're legitimized. We have bike trails here to play on. So here's another reason you want to come to Rapid City. In our brewery, we recently hired a new employee coming out of Fresno, California. And in our early discussions, he's like, yeah, I'm trying to get back in shape, do some outdoor stuff. I want to go fishing. And just talking about all the recreation activities in the Black Hills and just having some real accreditation, I think it's going to pay big benefits for our businesses. And then for us as the bike hub, trails aren't cheap. We got to raise some money, whether it's maintaining or adding or deleting trails. It's going to give us a true plan that we can walk in and say, we're a legitimate organization now. And when we start putting grants out there, we're legitimate. So
yeah, and you have a plan.
Yeah, we have a plan, thanks to some good guys.
With that, I always like to close. Every time I word the question a little bit differently, but it always has the same kind of intent. And we're going to start with Doc first, since there are two people on here and want to make sure that each get their voice heard. Say you had to move from Rapid City, Doc, for some unknown reason, but you could go anywhere else in the world. And I'm not asking you for a place that you would go. I'm asking you for what are the things that you would look for in a trail community that would speak to you to get you to move to that place? Bear in mind, you got to leave Rapid City.
I think it's right in the word there. It's community. It's having people that you want to hang out with. People that when your derailleur's screwed up and you need someone to help you. How do I fix this damn AXS thing? And you can call someone and said they'll help you with it and teach you. It's so much of my life is about community. And that's just, I was in the military for 22 years, chased around. It was interesting how you got issued a community every time you walked in the door to a new assignment. And then my life after the military has always been finding things that have involved me in community. And so I have some of my best friends, we talked earlier, are the Silverbacks. It's 4 guys and their wives. We're all over 60 and we just go play bicycle and smile. And we are actually now an international organization of the Silverbacks. So,
Evan, same question. Can't be in Rapid City for whatever reason. What are the things that you would look for in, going to a new community?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest thing is just accessibility and the types of terrain and trails. Right now, basically, with a young family and busy work, the ability to, jump out the door from the office over lunch and go pedal for an hour on awesome trails. Like that's what it's all about for me. And it's kind of funny. I've been here for 11 years and worked in a few different places, but it's actually been a legitimate part of my decision and consideration of is it the right job, the right place or whatever, but also how close is it to the trails and, can I go do that lunch ride? And that's a huge thing for me, is to be able to do that. Cause if I didn't have that opportunity, instead of riding 200 and some days a year, I'd probably ride 20. So just that ability to, you don't need to get in a car. You don't need to travel a long ways. You can get there. It's something that can just integrate with your daily life. That's just absolutely deal breaker for me. So yeah. So wherever it is, I would have to be able to do that, jump out the office door, pedal for 5 minutes and be riding some super fun trails. So.
And that is exactly what you do, because I see it on Strava.
Yep. Like clockwork. Keeps me sane though. So it's, it's funny, but like being able to go do that and, and here it's special where, we have all these different trails. Like I can go ride, 4 days in a row and never ride the exact same route. So that's unique too. And like, there's stuff where you can just kind of ride a cruisy trail, or you can ride some stuff that's like pretty spicy. And I mean, there's things that I can't cleanly ride yet. And that's cool to have that ability to, some days you can just cruise and some days you can be like, all right, I want to make sure I can get down this thing. So
got to get back to work too,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Evan, is there anything you want to close with before we send it over to Doc and have him wrap this one up?
No, I think we touched on everything. I mean, just, being able to share about, the Trail Town and the designation and what it means for our community. I mean, it obviously, I'm sure you can tell just with how I talk about it. It's a community I love to be a part of. I'm super proud of. And like I said, kind of this is home for me now. So, being able to just share that and talk about it, it's been really fun to do that. So first time on a podcast. So hopefully I did all right with that too.
It's all about just having a conversation. Doc, closing comments.
I'm kind of like Evan in one way, is that this is the longest I've ever lived in one place. Growing up in the military and then being in the military, my wife and I moved a lot. And then we've been here over 20 years now. And we actually did have a thought like, we need to move, mostly just because we collected so much crap in our house. We need to move so we get rid of some of this. And we kind of looked around, and I can't find another place that I really want to go to that has all the things we have, doesn't have hurricanes or alligators, and I can tolerate a blizzard every now and then. So I love Rapid City, and it's where I'm going to finish my life at. So
nice. That is a good way to wrap this one up. Thank you two very much for coming on to the Trail Effect podcast today. I really appreciate your time today, but I also really appreciate the fact that I've gotten to know you two, through this process of what we've done outside of this podcast, and getting to learn about your community and everything that you have going on. So I really appreciate you all being able to share what trails mean to your community and what they can do for your community and what your community does for them. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. It's been great working with you and getting to know you. So
thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect podcast. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain apparel and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.